Hello, my friends. Another haunted house challenge for you. This time I'm going to tell the story of how I am absolutely certain that the house that I grew up in was haunted, is haunted, still haunted. So I decided one day to drive back into the neighborhood where I grew up. Now it's a dead-end street, so you have to drive all the way to the end and turn around at the cul-de-sac and come back up the hill and around, and I happened to notice, as a good excuse to stop, that there was a little sort of rowboat, fishing boat for sale. And I thought, I'm going to stop and use this as a ruse, and maybe I could talk to somebody who lives here. And I happened to see that the garage door was open, and there were two gentlemen sitting inside the garage in lawn chairs drinking beer. You gotta love it. Anyway, I walk up and they greet me, and I asked the one gentleman if he was the one selling the boat, and he said, nope, that's his. He points to his neighbor, and I said, how long have you lived here? And he said, 20 years or so. So I knew that this was the same guy who had bought the house from my parents back in summer of 1996 when we moved out. And I said, well, I grew up in this house. And I will never forget it. The guy sitting next to him, who was his next door neighbor, sits back and goes, uh-oh. I think he knew what was coming. I think he knew what I was going to talk about. And the guy starts laughing, and he says, you're not the first person to come by here. And I said, oh yeah, who else has come by here? And he said, oh, I don't know, a few neighbors. Okay. Well, I said, I gotta ask, anything weird ever happened in this house? And the guy goes, well, yeah, except for a long time, I didn't believe any of it. And I just stood there with this same grin probably on my face. And the neighbor gentleman says, boy, are you in for it? Wow. Well, he proceeded to tell me a few stories. And he said that his now ex-wife, who moved into the house with him, refuses to set foot in that house because it is so haunted. And she said that a whole bunch of things happened to her. She was hearing things and seeing things, and stuff was disappearing and moving, and doors were opening, and just everything. And he was like, you're full of shit. And I don't blame him. I really don't, because he was skeptical, and nothing like that had ever happened to him. So, of course, he's not believing it, right? And then she moves out. I'm sure that it wasn't the haunted house that broke up their marriage. Marriages are complicated, but can't imagine that it was a haunting that did that. And so this gentleman proceeded to let me know all about the people who stay in the basement and the woman who comes out of the closet and the guy who hangs out in his garage. Yeah, the house is haunted. Still haunted. It went up for sale a few years ago, and it took everything I had not to take a tour of that house, because I knew that if I went inside, I might have something attached to me. It might come home with me. I lived there for most of my life growing up, until adulthood. And I can imagine that something there might have had some kind of attachment to us, to me. And I didn't really feel like that was great, but I also didn't want to be tempted to buy the house. Because I know the problems that the house had from growing up and having my dad work on it so much. It would have been a bit of a money pit. So, by not going in there, not touring the house, seeing it when it was having open houses or anything like that, I was able to kind of avoid that temptation of being roped back in. But he saw every single apparition that we ever saw, and I heard from a friend whose parents still live in the neighborhood that gentleman did move away from the house not too long after I had my conversation with him, maybe within a year. Probably because the house was too big for him at that point, and just being him, he didn't need that big of a house. But he stayed there through it all, just like we did. Look, we didn't feel threatened. We didn't feel threatened in any way. It was scary seeing an apparition in your house. It's scary. But we weren't threatened. There was nothing bad. There was no possessions happening. People weren't being harmed. You didn't leave my house with scratches all over your body or anything like that. It was just a haunted house. It was a house that people lived in, and a house that people loved. And they must have loved it in order to stay there. So, I think I have one more story, and maybe after that, if something else comes to mind, there will be more. But the video that I released from earlier today, the shorter one, I will tell that story in another brief video. I probably should have put a beginning chapter on that, but and maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll get rid of it. But there's not a whole lot more that I can remember. So hopefully you all have enjoyed these stories, and I like interacting with you all. Yeah, that's my haunted house. And hey, haunted houses are everywhere, so if you've got your own story, please share it. I look forward to hearing from you. I really do. I want to hear from you. So make sure you share your story with me. See ya.